Now, I have mentioned a couple of times his name, but our next speaker will inspire you to a level of confidence of your own abundant possibilities that you had never previously given yourself permission to consider. He is the friend of friends, and I feel very honoured and privileged to be included in that group. He is the people of people. He is the teacher of teachers, the leader of leaders. His biography, when it was released by Pan Macmillan, became an instant bestseller. And he is the subject of 3 independent documentaries by the ABC, BBC National Geographic, and most recently NBC. When his documentary A Step Too Far was released by NBC in America, 6.5 million people watched it in the first night. He is one of our country's best professional international speakers, and he is here today to share with us how you can travel to a number of exotic locations around the world with Jamie and himself, and how you will be given the tools to pay your way and help others in the process. Before we meet the man, I would like you to have a look at this.
This is National 9 News with Peter Hitchener.
Injured Antarctic adventurer Peter Bland forced to wait for a family reunion. Another attempt will be made tonight to
He fell in an avalanche. The avalanche took him out. He went down about 40 metres before going over a cliff edge down into a crevasse, which was another 40 metres. He impacted incredibly heavily. The fall he took was just a phenomenal fall, and the impact must have been incredible. For him to be even alive, I think, is a test of his strength and spirit.
At the moment, I'm about to go back to the hospital now. There is a concern about his heart, that surgery he's had on his heart, and the doctors here are advising that perhaps we should fly him out.
I don't know why on earth I use that footage to open up my talk. It gives me the heebie-jeebies every single time I see it. I'm a professional speaker. I've seen it a fair bit. Business is good. But still I use it. Why do I still use it? If it really does scare me to the core like it does and brings up these emotions. Why? You know why? To remind me, exactly as you say, how lucky I am now here, to be here speaking to you, sharing what I teach, having had that journey. And it makes me curious. And it's good to be curious, isn't it? That's right. It's good to be curious about your own capacity, about your own greatness, and about your own possibilities. In fact, by definition, once you give up that right to be curious and then to take actions about where that curiosity might take you, you're actually giving up your right to be great. And the only reason it dawned upon me such emotions as to how lucky I am now is because you're right. I gave up that right to be great. And all of us have that right within us to be great at every single moment. It's all a matter of choice, isn't it? So it's good to be curious, isn't it? And I wasn't. In fact, what happened to me, last time I was curious, is I was curious where our lunch was. I stepped out of this tent, last day of an expedition across the Antarctic Peninsula, 2 years in the planning, 2 months in the executing from the eastern side to the western side, dropping off sheer cliffs on the western side of Antarctica. Last day, I said to my mate, it's blowing about 100 knots, strong winds. I said, Jay, mate, it's too rough to walk today. Let's stay put. And I stepped 20 feet out of the tent to go and get the lunch out of the sleds. In that 5 minutes that I was out there, I felt this vibration. Like, have you ever been like on an underground catching a train somewhere and you can kind of feel the train before you can see it? Well, all of a sudden I could feel the train before I could see it. And then when I looked up to see what it was an avalanche. A giant avalanche of rock and rubble and ice was coming screaming down the mountain. And as quickly as I scrambled back to get to the safety of the tent, which was dug in like an igloo, I didn't make it. And I fell 50 metres down the mountain, down a crevasse, vertically fell 14 stories of an office building. And I lay there for 3 days. My friend Joe, who thought, well, that's been a while, during that time, because he was curious as to where's his friend, he came out there and he peered down this crevasse. And he couldn't get down there without anchoring the rope next to the tent, using his harness and using the crampons which go on your Italian designer shoes. They go on like this quite easily. And he peered down this crevasse and he saw the blood-spattered body of his best friend. But he was curious to see if I really was dead. So he threw back the rope because he couldn't use the rope because I fell a rope length and one man can only use half a rope, half up, half down. Got rid of the harness, couldn't use the harness. All he could go down with was his crampons and his ice pick. And step, step, pick, pick, step, step, pick, pick. Down, down, down he went. And as he got closer towards me, I fell 14 stories. When he was 4 stories away from me, he says, at this stage, the whole way thinking that I was dead, you see, but he was best friends with my family, my parents, my wife. He wasn't going to go back and say, we think Pete's dead. I know he's dead. And he came down there 4 stories from where I was, and he saw a tweak in my foot, and there was some movement. 3 stories down, and he saw my chest rising. 1 story down from my body, and he saw my eyes flittering. It's good to be curious, because you don't know what might be on, what we don't know. I mean, we only know what we know, don't we? Boy, oh boy, there must be a hell of a lot of stuff out there we don't know. And imagine how powerful and encompassing our life might be if we remain curious as to our own capacity, our own greatness, and what might be out there for us. Thank God my friend Jay was. He found that I had broken bones in my leg, crushed pelvis, suspected broken back, every rib on my left-hand side broken, fractured skull, bleeding from the nose, ear and mouth, and pretty severe brain damage. Most of that was his assessment. He already knew about the brain damage. Jay went to school with me. For 3 days he lay on me to give me his body temperature so I didn't die of hypothermia. At least that's his excuse. It was a boarding school. You see, I could tell you a story tonight and go on about the rescue and the heroic actions that they went through and how you haul an 85-kilo guy out of a 50-metre crevasse and to the surface and then haul him to the side for 6 days until the helicopter got to me. And 6 days until my femur was put back in. I got a condition called avascular necrosis when your bone dies. But I won't tell you that story because I want to tell you a story that can take you anywhere you like. And what I'm curious about is this. Do you have to fall down a crevasse to get lucky in life? Or can you learn from others? Like Lou just said, huh? Learn from others that have been there before you. And don't go down the crevasse. Don't get the scars. Don't get the brain damage. Don't go through the 5 years of rehabilitation and everything else. Learn from others that have been there before you. Well, you see, I wasn't as educated as you on that front, and I was pig-headed and stubborn. And all I had out of that fall, all I had out of it, was debt and guilt. You know what I thought I might do on a Saturday morning? I thought I might contemplate my debt, because that's a lovely thing to contemplate. And recommendation, if you want to have a great weekend, what you should do is go and get all your bills, medical bills, chemist, pharmacist, whatever, petrol, school fees, whatever. Just get all your bills, add them up, and make sure they sort of turn red, and then just beat yourself up about how your income isn't coming enough and you haven't got enough to survive, and just that sets you up for a really good weekend. You can really feel good about things. And then you could maybe go here and you could think about your guilt and how you feel guilty about what you could have done or should have done if only. That's a good formula, isn't it? Well, that was a formula that I chose, you see. My formula was to focus totally on my debt and my guilt. And you know that focus becomes reality. And the more you focus on what's in your mind become a reality, how big does that reality become? Bigger and bigger and bigger. In fact, it became so big that I completely forgot who I was and what I was doing. In fact, I forgot the very thing that I'd been taught before by a great mentor, but I'd completely forgotten it. This has been taught by schools around the world. It's been pursued by religious groups, cults, great leaders for centuries. I think it was best summarised by the great philosopher, an Englishman actually, Austin Powers. Your mojo. I completely forgot about my mojo because I used to have mojo. I used to have that thing that makes you go out there and have fun and vivacious, engage with people and see opportunities and just jump in there and go for it and open up a conversation, not even knowing where it was going, but just being open to being curious about the possibilities of where it might go. See, I used to have all that. I used to travel around the world and be a speaker in New York. I used to do boxing and mountain biking and ice climbing in Antarctica. I used to do all these things. But I've completely forgotten who I was. It's getting hot in here, isn't it? Hot in here, isn't it? I think I might take this shirt off. Get your mojo here. You like that? See, I used to have mojo. Who likes some mojo? Get some mojo in your life. I was giving a talk the other day, actually. I was giving a talk the other day in Sydney, and a lady in the audience said, "Oh, here we go. Here's some mojo, people. Get your mojo." mojo. Now, mojo, somebody and I know that you're curious now, how do you get a T-shirt? I'll tell you how to get that. But B, somebody said from the audience, which is a valid question, what does mojo look like? To which I said, hello? What is this, chopped liver? This is mojo with a microphone. Now, see, I know the distinction, and the reason it brings up these emotions about that footage when I see it, about how lucky I am now because life is great now. And those photos were taken, some of them last week. The motorbiking with Jamie and the crew up in Fraser Island, that was full on and it was fantastic. My only claim to fame there, by the way, 13 speakers that you might know, many of us, go up to Fraser Island, 7 got back. I was one of the 7, but only just. At any rate, life's good now, but that's 10 years since the accident. And for 5 years since the accident, I chose to dwell only upon the debt and the guilt. And as a result of that, I completely forgot who I was. In fact, I didn't think I was worthy of the job that I had, which is formerly professionally raising funds for a charity called the Multiple Sclerosis Society. And prior to that, I was a fund manager trading options, Forex, with elders. But I'd forgotten all that because I wouldn't allow myself to be me. You see? Have you ever forgotten your own greatness and just allowed yourself to settle for something that just isn't good enough for you? Well, I did. Meanwhile, 3 years gone past, this femur, which has gotten worse because the blood flow was stopped off for so long, got worse and worse and worse. I couldn't walk. So I said, "Doctor, give me a new hip." Doctor gives me a new hip. 6 months since I get my new hip, I'm out there flogging these moisturisers, hair care products and exfoliator products, network marketing door to door. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you think I was loving that? Very close to 0, maybe on the negative side. In fact, I was not at ease with flogging moisturisers and hair care products and exfoliators to friends. I was not at ease doing that. In fact, I was at dis-ease about doing that. And when you push yourself hard to do something that you are dis-ease with, what might you get? Dis-ease? Hello. I remember this day I came home and I said, "Gee, I've been flogging these moisturisers all day, hating it, but justifying. Who can justify something? Who's justified in the past doing something they're just so..." Come on, hands up. I'll get my ice pick out, hang on. Hands up, have you ever justified doing something that just was not worthy of your greatness? Well, thank you for sharing. This is Dr. Phil and Oprah. Well, I was hating it until this day I came home and I say, "I've got a bit of a pain down here near the hip side." She pulls the tracksuit down and says, "Oh my God, you've got a massive infection near where the hip operation was. You better call your doctor and go to hospital." I said, "Nah." I called my doctor. He says, "Go to hospital." I said, "I'll be back in an hour," or 2 hours, because we 1 hour to the city and back. I live on a farm. Or worst case scenario, I'll be back in the morning. 3 weeks goes past, I'm still in hospital. The doctors come around and they say, listen, Pete, you're amongst the best doctors in Australia fighting infectious diseases. You're getting the most powerful antibiotics you can get. Is there something going on in your life that really isn't sitting right with you? And I said, well, to be honest, I'm doing this network marketing and it's killing me. And he says, you're not wrong there. I'm only a doctor, but if I was you, I'd be you. Ha! He was a mate of mine who was also the doctor. That's why I went in there. I went to school with him. I'm only your friend. But if I was you, I'd be you. Boy, oh boy. I came home that night and I said, I'm back and I've got a dream. Because I'd completely forgotten who I was. But it took some convincing, because when he says, if I was you, I'd be you, I had to go through a whole day of therapy in my Avenue hospital bed from a friend coaching me to be me. That night I went home for sure, but that day I was resisting. If I was you, I'd be you. And I said to Andrew, his name, I said, Andrew, but who am I? And he says, you're an adventurer. And you teach people to be adventurous. And I said, yeah, Andrew, but that's the old me. That's before the avalanche, and that's before the debt, and that's before all the guilt. Have you seen my bills? And he says, well, Andy, I went to school with you, and all I know is the character in front of me is not showing the characteristics of the boy that I went to school with. Step up, or I don't want to be your friend. It's good to have people in your life sometimes. It'll keep you accountable for who you could be rather than who you're settling to be. Yeah? And Andrew was one of those friends. And I said, mate, I can't go back to those. Mate, that's the old me. That's how I used to be. And he said, aren't you the guy that started a business from nothing when you left school, from nothing in your backyard in a washing machine? Didn't you end up getting an export contract to Japan and selling to the whole Japanese market, and then you're doing that to become a professional sailor, sailing boats? And I said, yeah, well, that's true. That is true, actually. What happened was this. I was travelling through South America for a year. I'd done a commerce degree the last thing I was going to do was actually use it. So I came home, my friend had two business ideas. One was a brilliant business idea. We did the other one. And the other one was this shortbread recipe, flour, sugar and butter, and we started baking them. We literally started baking them in a washing machine. I found generally on a normal cycle. And you got perfect set of shortbread every single time. Anyway, we're pumping these shortbread out. It's going fantastic. I sell it local to the deli buys, and they go, what's bigger? Because I was curious, you see. What's bigger than the local deli? Oh, Melbourne, Damaroo, David Jones, Myers, Hilton Hotel, Crown Casino. Well, that's bigger. I'll do that. Oh, yeah, they took it, bit of a change here, but that's okay. They took it. Oh, that's okay. I've done national. What's bigger than that? I was curious, because it's good to be curious, isn't it? What's bigger than that? Well, I'm doing all this offshore racing boats. I wanted to get into the real offshore internationally. I'm just doing domestically. I know. I'll export my cookies to Japan, and that'll justify me going to Japan, and then I can bring back the boat from the winning yacht in the Melbourne-Osaka yacht race, which is the longest double-handed yacht race in the world. That's a good idea, isn't it? So I thought I'll do that. So I wrote a letter to every single skipper in the race, went to see JETRO. JETRO stands for Japanese External Trade Organisation. That's the Japanese organisation which sponsors small businesses. They look at my case, they go, Mr. Bland, we will sponsor you to go to Tokyo Food Expo, the largest food expo in the world. One small, squashy little thing. Mr. Takeda, he come from Tokyo in 2 weeks' time. He conduct a quick tour of your factory. Anyway, that's the whole story. So it's good to be curious, isn't it? Yeah? Yes, I got a factory, and yes, I pumped the cookies out, and yes, I went to Japan, and yes, I got the contract to bring the boat back from Japan to Australia. But here I am still in my Avenue hospital bed, deep in my pillow, and there's my doctor friend Andrew telling me my own stories about who I was in the past, but wasn't allowing myself to be now. Are you with me? And you know what? This isn't my story, this is your story. I'm just metaphorically telling you some examples of my life, but I want you to contemplate your greatness and where it may have been and where it will come from in the future, because I've forgotten mine. And it took a friend to take me for a day-long journey through my own stories. And he says to me, but after that, didn't you go to Antarctica and save that expedition and, get that UK guy that took you under his wing and became your mentor? And I was like, yeah, Andrew, but that's the old me. That's, haven't you seen my debt and you've seen all the guilt that I've got around the family selling the farm to pay for my airlift and all the rest of it? He says, don't give me the rubbish. Didn't you go to Antarctica on a 60-foot yacht? Yeah, with 10 lives on board. 6 mil of aluminium between 10 lives and icebergs the size of small countries. Now, there were 10 people on board, 3 of whom had just climbed Mount Everest. Some of them were great climbers, but they weren't all such great sailors. And mojo, which we all want, it's pretty unanimous, everyone wants mojo, is that right? Bit of a hands up, everyone wants mojo? Okay, well, one of the vital ingredients of mojo is having the confidence to commit to opportunities. If you got mojo, a sure sign if you're looking for mojo, but thank goodness you found it. If you're looking for mojo, you'll find it's a formula of having a confidence to commit to opportunities. And this is a story about opportunities, because you know what opportunities are? Slippery little suckers. And this is a classic. Thanks, Helen. You're on a 60-foot yacht. It's minus 60 degrees wind chill factor. You've got frozen salt water on the deck and on the mast and all the ropes, halyards and sheets. In fact, it was so cold, the salt water was freezing on the mast. We'd be chipping the mast so the yacht didn't get ice heavy at the mast and the mast acting like a keel. Well, one of the sheets on the right-hand side, otherwise known as the starboard side, port and starboard, one of the sheets on the right-hand side had gone over the gunnel, the edge of the boat, because they were so thick with ice, you couldn't actually tack the boat without first getting the ropes and putting all the ropes in the cockpit and pouring boiling water over the ropes to break the ice off them. Well, one of these ice-laden ropes had gone over the edge of the boat and was dangling in the side. A very unusual thing happens this night. This particular opportunity came into my life that ended up getting me a book, got me a documentary. Ice Break Heart was the Australian story back in 2002 because of this rope. What are opportunities? Slippery little suckers. You've got to grab them right there and then. Otherwise, they're gonski.